I have made a severe and continuous lapse in my judgment. Welcome to High Tech with Grumpo, a show where I get high and talk about tech. Today, we are going to be exploring YouTuber apologies, but not in the same way as SNL and various commentary channels has explored them, no. We're going to put a High Tech with Grumpo spin on YouTuber apology videos. Yes, we are. Before we get into the video, I'm supposed to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more from me or more content like this, even though it's kind of weird to ask you to do that before you've even seen the content. So do it at your own discretion, but I'm getting off topic. Either way, YouTuber apology videos. We've seen them. Turns out a lot of them are apologies for being racist, which makes me very uncomfortable because that literally is the majority of them today. Instead of saying things like racism bad and commenting on how YouTubers sigh or bring their dogs or don't wear makeup and sit on the ground in their giant effing mansions, we're going to train a machine learning model to ingest all of the classic YouTuber apology videos and spit out a new classic, something brand new, based on the structure and vocabulary of YouTuber apologies past. I thought this would be really interesting to do, and I was inspired by this guy Pranjal, who wrote an article on character-based text generation using poetry. His article's super detailed. I'm linking it below. He also shares his code, which is awesome. Not everybody does that. And I thought it would be a fun way to explore some machine learning with you guys in a fun YouTube context. Now, my script hasn't been auto-generated yet. My machine learning model is still being trained. So I thought we'd go over the basics of machine learning, text generation, and I'd show you a little bit more about how I built this model. All the resources, including links to Pranjal's original article and his code, will be linked down below in case anybody's interested or in case anybody wants to try this exercise. I'll also include some links for setting up TensorFlow on an M1 Mac if anybody's interested. It was not fun to do. All of the versioning was not great. Managing all of the versioning was a lot. I'm going to try to keep this video appropriate for all levels of machine learning and computer science, so if you're really, really experienced in machine learning, maybe you just want to take this idea and run with it to try it out yourself. If you're a beginner, I'll link a bunch of resources down below. And I'll try to keep the definitions, descriptions of what I'm doing, etc. as beginner-friendly as possible. Ooh, also, before I forget, follow me on Instagram and Twitter at elfgrumpo. There's a story behind it. It does involve disenchantment. Maybe I'll do a video on it someday if people are interested. So like I mentioned earlier, today we're going to be using machine learning to auto-generate a YouTuber apology. Now let's dive into that for a second, just so we fully understand what we're doing. Machine learning is a subgenre, I suppose, of AI or artificial intelligence, which essentially is the study of developing algorithms which improve over time given various examples of inputs and outputs. Now, in the example of Pranjal, that would mean that Pranjal showed the algorithm various different instances of poetry. His algorithm was a poetry generation algorithm, which is super cool. We'll get into what he did in a second because I really enjoyed it. But the algorithm went character by character or letter by letter to essentially guess what the next letter would be. Our machine learning algorithm in question is going to be a neural network, or rather a specific type of neural network called an LSTM, which stands for long short-term memory. Don't click off. I swear it's not as complicated as it sounds, or I'll try to simplify it and link actual descriptions down below. A neural network is essentially an algorithm that's modeled after how the human brain works. It's comprised of neurons and edges, which map to the biological neurons in our brain, and synapses, the little gaps between neurons where chemical signals are passed back and forth. In the artificial neural network, or in our algorithm, those chemicals will actually be real numbers, and the synapses are called edges because it's treated like more of a graph. In graph theory, the thing that connects two separate vertices is called an edge. You can call it a vertex, a node, a neuron. It's a graph. It's two things connected by another thing. That's essentially all it is. Let's not let vocabulary trip us up, okay? So both the neurons and edges have weights that are assigned to them during model training. So that means that you show your algorithm an example and you show it the output. You show it another example and you show it another output, and it adjusts the weights thus. There's also a concept of layering in neural networks. It's really just, honestly, it's not even a fancy way. It's just a way of grouping neurons together and saying these neurons are focused on doing this one thing, like how you have neurons that send signals to your muscles to make your muscles move, and other neurons that participate in your mental lexicon and are dedicated to language processing in the brain. In artificial neural networks, those are separated out, even though in biology, there's probably some crossover. So it's just a way to simplify it for humans developing artificial intelligence algorithms, and it's a way for them to talk about their neural network and make it sound smart. My multi-layered deep learning model, we get it. It does a lot of stuff. Sorry, I'm a little salty. I've been surrounded by machine learning douchebags my entire adult life. I could simplify it further by saying it's just an algorithm that takes in inputs and the correct answer or correct outputs and forms an association between the two to properly predict an output when given an input that it has not seen before. Now, when I'm saying I use an LSTM, that stands for long short-term memory. So essentially, people are dumb and cannot replicate the human brain efficiently at all. That's why we have this whole concept of layering. That's why we have all of this fancy nomenclature to make it sound smart, when really a lot of us don't know what we're doing. And yes, I speak for the majority, which is also why the state of AI shouldn't be that scary, except for deepfakes. That's a fun, scary application. Well, I mean, mostly scary, but the science behind it is pretty fun. But a long short-term memory essentially adds this concept of a memory cell where, based on various factors, it can decide to forget something, output something, or remember something. An output would be passing it on to a further step. Forgetting it would be dropping it off, and remembering it would be storing the thing in the memory cell. LSTMs are based on these things called RNNs, which stand for recurrent neural networks, and those deal with sequential data like text or things that happen over time, and they tend to have a drop-off or forget things that happened farther away. In the beginning of NLP, the study of natural language processing, people used recurrent neural networks almost exclusively to model text data. They found that there was something missing, and hence LSTMs were born. But High Tech with Grandpa, you said it's shown examples of inputs and their associated outputs. If we're doing text prediction, what is the input and what is the output? Well, that's a great question. So in text prediction or text generation, the input would be the first, say, n characters, and the output would be the n+1th character or the next character. You take a sliding window of characters and you try to predict the next one, and that's what your model is trained on. So this video was inspired by an article, and I just want to go through the original article a little bit to show how the author experimented with various iterations of an LSTM and to show the examples of drop-off at various levels. Now, for my model, I used their most successful one. I tried a few iterations, a few different algorithms, both from the author of this article and from my own brain. A lot of them had a small training time, so I could experiment and iterate. They all turned out terrible, just like how the author demonstrates. Fortunately, though, the author had linked his GitHub with various models that he'd tried, and I just made a few tweaks to his best model from the article. It takes 3 days to train, so that's the one we're gonna go with. I haven't read it yet. I'm really excited to see the output though. But before we do that, let's just take a quick look at what the author of the original article did, because I think he is owed an homage, really. I think we should look at his machine learning algorithms poetry, because he teaches a computer to write poetry, which is pretty cool. Okay, so before we get to my dramatic rating of the YouTuber apology script that my AI generated, I first want to give a shout out to my boy Pranjal Srivastava, who wrote the blog post. He experimented with a bunch of different algorithms. He made them wider, deeper, that sounds dirty, it's machine learning-y, I swear. And I want to show some examples. So for his toy version, the very small, not very many layers version, the output was, the reaper should by time decrease. His tender air might bear his memory, but thou contracted to it she which is actually very similar to what I got when I experimented with a similar model to the one that he did. So you need to know how you train your model really impacts what the model's results will be when it is game time. Since Pranjal trained his model on poetry and I trained mine on YouTuber apology scripts, I sort of wanted to see what would happen with our toy model. So I did a very similar toy model to him. Note that I did borrow a lot of his architecture to build my model, though I made a few tweaks along the way that I knew would help me out from experience. My toy model came out like this. I'm going to take off my glasses to show that I'm more serious. But at the time of film in the video, if you've watched the third 6-minute video, I've now decided and that to that and that to that and that the. So that was my dramatic rating of the dumb model apology. I hope you liked it. Let's see a couple of his other results. So a more trained model. The Ripper should by time decrease. His tender air might bear his memory, but thou contracted to thine own desire, that in the breath their doom one drawn to ray, door partnick backanoy stare sick do dexel. You can see the quality decreases quite significantly. Now let's check out a deeper model. This one was a lot better. The drop-off is later and more subtle, if I'm remembering correctly. The Ripper should by time decrease, his tender air might bear his memory, but thou contracted to the world's false sparrow, with eyes so donned tools be thy dawnthorns, which memorian of the seasons new, Mike own self-love, to shall art constant. It sounds like there's a guy named Mike, and he's loving himself. A wider model. The Ripper should by time decrease, his tender air might bear his memory, but thou contracted to thine own bright eyes. Feedst thy sigh, are so bedure poise, or matey dissur that gares mont me love thee, when I bray the wood and lays in the ear sire. Then the mood just, okay, it dropped off. And finally, a gigantic model, which I based my model off of, and it took 3 days. The Ripper should by time decrease, his tender air might bear his memory, but thou, contracted to thine own bright eyes, feed'st thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel. My beeped is she Brett o' Bath da ser ill. Tears do I pine and turfeet day by day, or gluttoning on all or away. Model was good enough for me if it did that shit. So why fix something that's not broke? I tweaked it a little bit, and that's what's running right now, actually. So Grumpo, how did you do this? How did you make this iconic YouTuber apology? Well, first I rounded up all the classic YouTuber apology videos, and those are typically the ones that I personally saw the most commentary on. And now I'm gonna go through them because I kind of have to give context so that you guys know when my model outputs some shit that it's not my fault, it was the training data, because a lot of these are racist. Okay, so we have James Charles, Tati's Accusations and Tati. His first video with him in no makeup, just speaking quietly, addressing the drama. His second video with clapback receipts, and everybody accepted it, and now he is in drama again for Tati's Accusations. We have a couple from Jeffree Star. The first one is titled period, just all caps and a period, and that's the title. It is what it is. You see why I was worried. His other one, Doing What's Right, was iconic not because of the message, but because he was wearing Louis Vuitton furry slippers sitting on a gold couch in the middle of his mansion. It was opulence to like the 15th degree. I don't know what else to say. Doing What's Right is classic, it's great, everybody should watch it. I included Tati Bye Sister, not her apology for Bye Sister, but just Bye Sister because that's also iconic. We have PewDiePie's classic video of him saying the N-word. Lots of N-words, so buckle up because... Oh, God. Now we have Shane with Blacks. He apologized for doing Blacks. And he apologized for Pet as well. That's another one. He apologized for for liking the younger human. Oh, God. He apologized for that. We also have Shane taking accountability, his most recent and least well-received apology. So that's something. Now we're moving on to Logan Paul. We have Logan Paul's apology for filming in the forest. Dear God, I hate this. I'm smiling. I don't know why I'm smiling, but I hate this. These are all terrible. I don't want to continue. We're moving on to Tana Mojo. We have her TanaCon apology. We have her apology for saying the N-word. And we have her apology, a long overdue apology, for microaggressions towards people of color. Do you see why I'm worried that I'm going to be apologizing for doing something racist now because of my machine learning algorithm? Because if you don't, you will. I would love to move on to something in a different category, but now we're at Laura Lee. We have Laura Lee apologizing for racist tweets, and that apology wasn't good, but it was a freaking classic on the internet. But she apologized for that apology and made a better one. So that's two. Jaclyn Hill apologizing for hairy lipsticks. We have Alfie Days apologizing for the 1 pound challenge. That's where he tried to survive on 1 pound, and he used his celebrity status to get things for free to survive throughout the day, which nobody has access to, especially people who their reality is they only have 1 pound a day to live on, or even less. Jenna Marbles. We have one wrong fish tank, 45-minute apology, and then another apology for everything else she did offensive in her entire YouTube career. I believe they were the same length. Do with that what you will. So that is what my training data consists of. I had some issues setting up TensorFlow for the Mac with the M1 chip. If anybody wants to replicate this, I'll leave links to the solution in the description down below. I will be reading out the apology script right after I say like and subscribe if you want to see more content from me. It really helps me out. Leave a comment down below for anything that you want to see in the future. Any questions you have, I'm an open book. Let's go. Before you go home though, watch this. But at the time of filming the video, if you've watched the third 6-minute video, which I've now decided to do, that I was like, and oh my god, it just repeats I was like. This was supposed to be the good model, I swear. Honestly, what does this tell me? This tells me that one, YouTuber apology videos are very different structurally from poetry. And two, the phrase I was like is way overused in speech. This was so bad, I'm gonna go home. Well, hello, different lighting and changed appearance. I'm back because I don't like how I ended the video. The thing is, that's kind of the nature of working in machine learning. In reality, it takes weeks if you're lucky, months if you're not, to fine-tune an algorithm to the point where you can convince yourself that it's learned something. I always think it's funny when people say AI is going to take over the world, because if they saw my model, they would see it had a thing or two to say about that. That. To that and that to that. I was like. I have to say, it doesn't not sound like a YouTuber though. Complaining about making a 6-hour video and then repeating the phrase I was like 1,000 times. Pretty close. Not quite poetry, but not every model is a one-size-fits-all. Maybe I'll sit around and tweak it and come back with something better. Either way, I'm gonna take it as a win. I got some YouTube-ish sounding sentences out of it, and it learned the phrase I was like. You gotta take your wins where you can find them. Just let me know if I should make a 6-hour video, and I was like, Grumpo out.